I think it's important to show the good in the world, and a lot of times we don't see that in news. But I also think it's important to reflect everything that's happening, well, most everything, because you don't. If you think all the world is rosy all the time, you're not going to understand your need for God, right? And part of that is journalists is exposing that is to understand that there's sin in the world and the weight of it, and how it affects you and everyone around you or the whole world. And if you don't tell those stories, then you're missing the need for a Savior, you know?
As journalists, we have a duty to represent those humans and tell their stories because they're valuable, because they're created in God's image. So I think that's a unique perspective that Christian journalists can bring to the profession, that you're not just telling news, or you're not coming at it with an angle or trying to further an agenda, but that you want to tell stories about people that are compelling, that drive them to understand the Creator.
MAVEN is a partnership. We partner with people around the country to put on our virtual training, to do all of our live events, to take students on immersive experience trips. We have partners around the country who help us to do this. And by helping us to do this, I mean they partner with us financially to make all that we do at MAVEN possible.
Yes, this work is impossible without those friends. And that's why Erin and I are really encouraged. This month, at the end of the year, there's a group of MAVEN partners who have pledged $54,000 to challenge our other friends to step in and step up and support the work of MAVEN. In fact, how we end up at the end of the year really dictates what we can do in the coming year and the plans that we can make. And so I want to encourage you, our listeners, to take that challenge and to meet or even exceed the $54,000 challenge gift that these partners have given. The financial partnership with MAVEN at the end of the year is so vital to our mission. And so we want to invite you to help us meet that $54,000 challenge. Would you consider a year-end gift by December 31st?
Thank you for being an essential part of MAVEN's mission. We couldn't do it without you.
Well, we've got two special guests on the MAVEN Parent Podcast today, Brian Basham and Caleb Bailey, who are both with World Watch. Now, if you're not familiar with World Watch, we're going to get into it, but let me introduce Brian first. Brian lives in Charlotte, North Carolina. He's married to Meg Basham. Maybe some of you have heard of her name before. They've got two daughters, and he's been in broadcasting now for over 20 years and is now the program director and host of World Watch.
I think his nickname though is Big Bash. So we're going to talk about how do you get that nickname? So people who watch World Watch, they're going to say, "Oh, Big Bash, that's who they're talking to."
Yes. Now, Brian went to college on a trombone scholarship. That's just kind of a different trajectory than journalism. Worked as a Jungle Cruise skipper at Disneyland, and
amazing.
And his wife Meg is a writer and movie reviewer. So you've got
so all those trombone lessons your parents made you do that really paid off.
Yeah, well, I was going to be a rock star, and ska bands were really huge when I was in college, and it went out like right after that. So this is how we ended up here.
Yes, ska bands. That's right. Yes.
Yeah. So
I wasn't going to be
welcome.
a rock band.
We'll welcome Brian here to the show. We also want to welcome Caleb. Caleb is a reporter for World Watch. Caleb is originally from Southern California, and apparently got demoted and currently lives in, I believe it's Greenville, South Carolina, with his wife and daughter.
Some people wouldn't see that as a demotion.
Yeah, well, I do. But he was with the World Journalism Institute in 2021, went to Cal State University Channel Islands, played the piano. I don't know if you and Brian have played instruments together.
Well, I actually play trombone too, but I don't like to take center stage. So I let him have that one.
Right. What a humble guy you are, Caleb.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got
Caleb is an
California,
avid
he's
sports
got Trombone.
fan. For some reason, loves the Oregon Ducks.
Mm.
You're a Southern California guy, and also took ice skating lessons to get into hockey, but never ended up
did.
playing hockey. So another fail, I think, for Caleb. But these two guys
Way to
are
get a dig at
key.
my parents.
These two guys are key with World Watch, and what they're doing is really important stuff. And we wanted to take this time to expose our audience to what you guys are doing, because we think Christian parents in this cultural moment really need what you guys are doing.
Mm-hmm.
So, welcome to the Maven Parent Podcast. Glad you guys are here.
Thanks for
Well,
having
thank
us.
you very much. And we'll only talk over you every time you guys talk. So don't even,
Okay,
even
that's
worry about
good.
that.
Yeah, these guys are professional journalists. And actually, okay, so why don't we start with let's start with Brian, and then we'll go to Caleb. But hey, give us Brian, you start. Tell us about yourself a little bit. Give us a little bit of your journey, how you became a Christian, and kind of the intersection of faith and journalism, your path to journalism. Give us a little bit of background so we can get to know you and your passion for journalism, Brian.
Sure. So I'll just tell you first, the most important part, the Christian part, is I became a Christian when I was in the 6th grade. Went off to a camp, probably like a lot of kids do, and made that decision for Christ at that time. And you know, I would say I was like stayed in the church pretty faithfully through most of my life, but I would say, you know, in college I struggled a little bit, and towards the end of college I started to find my way, and have been pretty heavily following him since that time. And so I worked in regular broadcasting, your local news. I was a weather guy for a long time. I was a news anchor for a lot of that as well. And most recently in Charlotte, I was a news anchor before I came over here. And you know, towards the end, it was 2020 when I last did that. It really started to get more difficult. It's always been difficult to be a Christian in the news business, right? And you wouldn't think so, right? You're supposed to be telling the truth, and kind of really all truth stems from the Bible. But you know, it's a field that pretty actively works against biblical principles. And my wife, Megan, was working for World at the time, and they wanted to start this new show. And so they just were picking my brain, and I was just kind of consulting with them a little bit. And then eventually got down the line, and they're like, hey, would you be interested in leading this and running this? And I love doing stuff for children. I worked at a crisis pregnancy center back before I started doing this, and I for 3 years gave a sexual abstinence program in high schools, and I take over the health classes for 4 or 5 days out of the week and do a program. And so it was just an age group that I had a passion for, and so I kind of just jumped at it. And it was right during COVID, and it was a perfect time because at that point in regular news, all you were doing was talking about this disease, and this show kind of allowed us to kind of talk about a whole bunch of other things instead. And so it's been really cool.
Yeah. Oh, that is awesome. Well, okay, Caleb, your turn. Tell us a little bit about your story and then how you ended up at World Watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up gratefully in a very faithful Christian household in Southern California. My parents both raising us up in the fear and admonition of the Lord, and so it was something that I knew growing up. But there was a point in my kind of early teens that the Lord was kind of open my eyes and show me that my parents' faith is not my own, and that if I stand before the Lord, I have nothing to plead. Innocence. I'm sinful, and it's on me. I can't say my parents are saved, so I'm just going to follow them. So I came to the Lord around 12, 13 years old, and growing up in youth programs, had a lot of just very good male role models, and that kind of was formative for me in learning how to live that faith out and understand the sanctification part of it. And so I was grateful for that. Hopped around to a few different universities during my time in college, all in Southern California. You know, left different schools for different reasons and couldn't really figure out what I wanted to do. And ended up at Cal State Channel Islands just because that was local. And many people that hear that and they think that I had this Hawaii education where I'm sitting by the palm trees and surfing in between classes. Cal State Channel Islands is in Camarillo, California, like buried in this canyon that's kind of like a little desert in an old mental institution. So it's not as rosy as people picture. But I was just trying to figure out what to do, and I was studying communications. And my dad reads World Magazine and listens to World's podcast. It's called The World and Everything in It. And they were advertising a program called the World Journalism Institute, where they admit a handful of college students and teach them how to be journalists from a biblically objective perspective. And so I just applied because I had nothing else going. And that door was opened and I attended. And while I was there, they offered me an internship out in Asheville, North Carolina, which is quite a different coast than the West Coast, all the way on the East Coast. And I went and packed up my Toyota Tacoma, and that Tacoma has not touched California soil since 2021. And everyone out here calls it a California truck. They say it's not a real truck, but they're just all haters of California. So the World kindly brought me on as a full-time employee for World Watch as a feature reporter, and that's what I'm doing to this day.
Okay, so give us maybe an overview, or from your perspective, kind of doing journalism and being a Christian. What's the kind of the intersection of your faith and your journalism, and how does your Christian faith does it fuel what you do, or how does it fuel what you do? How does it help you see kind of what you're doing, the work you're doing, and how it fits into kingdom work and cultural engagement and all that good stuff? Like, help, because I think there's a lot of people out there who just maybe they haven't thought Christianly about journalism. So give us a little education on that from a Christian worldview. Okay, how do we think about journalism?
Brian,
go ahead,
you want to start? Yeah. Well, one way that I've looked at it is that journalism, simply put, is telling stories about people, and so journalism is maybe you can make the argument one of the most Christian professions. Now there isn't a ranking system, but we have this solemn duty to truthfully tell stories about humans. Humans, the most valuable form of life, because those humans are created in God's image. And so as journalists, we have a duty to represent those humans and tell their stories because they're valuable, because they're created in God's image. So I think that's a unique perspective that Christian journalists can bring to the profession, that you're not just telling news, or you're not coming at it with an angle or trying to further an agenda, but that you want to tell stories about people that are compelling, that drive them to understand the creator. And World News Group, it's named after the world. God's world is how Joel Bells, our founder, looked at it. He said, this is God's world that we're living in. So as we're reporting on natural disasters, events, politicians, legislation, all this stuff, that is within the context of a creator, an architect who's built all this. And so we're reporting from that perspective. So you can't really do journalism without having that framework. Any other journalism is going to be kind of lost. It doesn't have a foundation. And so that's the benefit of being a Christian journalist, is you do have that foundation. You do know there's a rhyme and reason for all those things.
Right. And we
That's
talk
good.
about it, from the perspective of biblical objectivity, right? And, you can see it the way, for a long time, you could probably, journalists and professional journalists in the mainstream media has probably viewed themselves as truth tellers, right? And they tell stories that are true. But if you look at the last 5 years, especially, the way they cover stories, it's clearly not done objectively from a truthful, objective point of view. And you would do that as a Christian. And like, if you take a story like, can men become women? Can men have babies? Can all those things are objectively not true, but you see our media cover it as if it is.
Mhm.
And I think that if you're a Christian, you have um, your point should be to tell the truth in those situations, and it just is it's hard to do that. And really, what World has tried to do over the years is have us, even if you're not working at World specifically, no matter where you work, to go into those places and help tell the truth. And for me, when I was in regular broadcasting, you have these meetings every day. You would have our news meetings where we're trying to decide what we're going to cover for the day, and everybody's pitching stories. And you hear the perspective of say, somebody was going to cover an abortion story. Well, they always cover it from the perspective of the woman, right? The woman's point of view only, and that how it's going to affect her life, and so on and so forth. Well, when we would tell a story as a Christian journalist, we would tell it from the perspective of the baby, right? How is that baby going to be affected? And so and we would discuss how the woman might be affected as well, but we look at it as a whole, and we think that God, kind of asks us to look at the big picture when we deal with these stories. Whereas I think, a lot of regular news just wants to deal, everything is subjective, and everyone is kind of their own God in a sense.
Mm.
And so they address news from that perspective. And I think when you have just a God, our God, it's easier to tell the truth, right? And if you're telling it from that perspective, I think that's helpful.
Yeah, it makes me think about some of the things that have happened just even in the recent past in our culture, where journalists and these big mainstream media companies or channels end up getting caught with maybe doctored videos
Sure.
or interviews that are done where they cut out the important context and misrepresent things. And it just speaks to the need. And of course, you look at the kind of the data on the mistrust of media, and all that speaks to the huge need for Christians to go into journalism and to be truth tellers. If we are telling the stories of people, you don't necessarily have to outright lie. But you can deceive people simply by withholding important parts of the truth. And so, what you guys are doing is really important.
Yeah, and you'll see that, right, when you're watching the news, that there is a pretty big story that should be told, and you'll look in CBS and ABC and NBC. It was like it never existed, it never happened. And to me, that's as much not telling the truth as lying in a story. And so that we kind of have that responsibility, right, as we pick our stories every day, is to make sure that we pick well-rounded stories or well-rounded assortment of stories. So you kind of get in a big picture all over everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, and we don't like to name names, but MSNBC is probably the worst.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so Brian, you brought up picking stories, and that was one question I had for you guys, because I'm sure as you brainstorm, many ideas will come to the table as far as stories that you cover. So for what World Watch is trying to accomplish, and
actually, should we let our audience know? I'm just thinking plenty of people who aren't familiar with World Watch.
Yeah.
Do we maybe have them give us an overview? Because you're going to get into it's some good meaty stuff. But before we get into that, maybe tell us, hey, what is World Watch for our listeners who aren't familiar with World and World Watch?
Sure. Well, the short end of it is it's a daily 10-minute news program that's designed for students, and it's mainly for like 7th to high school age group. But in all honesty, we have a huge portion of homeschoolers, and so the 2-year-old watches, the 5-year-old watches, the 10-year-old, and the 14. So like the whole kit and caboodle will watch the show. But it's a kind of a mix of current news stories. And what's nice about what we do is we cover around the world, so we're not just U.S. focused, and we have a purpose behind that, in that we want to show and expose our audience to the plight of the rest of the world, what they're dealing with, what they're looking at. And I think it helps, it helps Christians, think about the rest of the world, pray for the rest of the world, and think about, what we can do as Christians for the rest of the world, and how what everybody does affects everybody else. And so, but anyway, we have what we call an A block and a B block, and that A block is primary news stories that have that. And then in our B block, we do what we call features. And in all honesty, that could be a story about anything. And they're usually longer. They're like 1.5 to 2.5 minutes long. And they may be what we call an explainer about things that are happening in government. They could be a segment like Caleb does, which is, can I do that? And that's where he tries to do different jobs, or he tried to be a ninja one time. So it kind of just runs the gamut. It's all kind of interest like that. And of course we have a lot of fun stories as well that we like to mix in. So their stories kind of cover all the different areas you talked about before: science and history and nature and biology. But it's got a little bit of everything, and it's all done by Christian journalists. I would not say the show is specifically Christian, right? It's mostly a news story, but again, it sticks where the Bible says this, we say this; where the Bible says that, we say that. And so we stick firm to a biblical truth about all the storytelling that we do, and we try to tell the truth in every story that we do.
Did you want to
Caleb,
add
do you want to take
anything,
a stab
Caleb?
at it?
I was gonna say, couldn't have said it better myself. The only thing I would add to it is that sometimes I have to be careful how I say this because it's a blanket statement, but sometimes when you hear Christian media, Christian news, Christian movie, Christian music, there may be an instant kind of like, all right, we're gonna get a subpar product, but at least it's Christian. It's got a good message behind it. And I don't think sacrifice is one for the other. I think it's still good quality, and part of that is because it's 10 minutes. We keep it to 10 minutes, we keep it to news, and the news doesn't have to be devotionalized. So every single story that happens, we don't need to be like, what's the moral of the story? Like, where does the gospel fit in here? Sometimes it's just, hey, here's the news. This is just what you need to know, and we're going to move on. And that's the nice thing about 10 minutes is it's just enough news. It's not too much. It's not too little. It's just enough. And then you can move on with your day after 10 minutes of news.
Mm. Well, and it seems to me too, even by the topics that you guys cover, you're communicating, again, without saying explicitly the gospel every time or saying, and this is God's world, but you're broadening young people's view of God is involved in everything, everywhere, all over the world. And so when you talk about science and a new turtle that was discovered, or you're talking about, something that happened, how they figured out how to bring water to a village in Africa and things like that, you're putting on display that God is moving and working all over the world, and that humans are discovering things because that's what humans do, and all of these things. And so you're communicating so much about the Christian worldview and how we ought to care about all these things without, like you said, Caleb, being cheesy about it. We don't have to be cheesy about it. God's in all these areas of art and technology, and you guys even cover etymology, words, and where they come from and their meaning. So I love all of that, and I think that in and of itself communicates a lot to your listeners about what Christians ought to care about.
Yeah, I think it really opens the door for, and like take something like Michelle Schlavin has a brand called Signature Science, right? And she's done some amazing stories. They're all so cool, and she is able to bring a really unique look to it. But the point of that whole segment is to identify God's creation in nature, right? In science, and how it all works together for, not only for his good, but and again, I'm putting a little Christianese on there, but it happens without us saying this is exactly how that happens. But it's a really fun way too, if you think about it. We write our news, like, we don't assume knowledge. for the students, and really
Mm.
regular news for adults should do that as well. How many times you're watching the news and they're launching in this story and they're talking about something you're like, I don't know what's been going on between Palestine and Israel specifically, And for us, we're always like, well, we're going to tell that story, but we won't tell it all in one big swoop. We hit a different element of it each time we tell it. And so we're always like trying to build on their previous knowledge. And we explain, we do a lot of explaining, which news should do, right? So that when you hear a story, you understand the economics of it, right? If they're talking about economics and you understand the principles of it, not just assume that you know what a quarter point interest rate drop is, right? You should explain that to us for those people who don't know what that might mean. And so it's really kind of fun for us. And because we don't do it live, we do it in post-production, we got to add a ton of cool graphics to it. We shoot some really fun, stand-ups and stuff like that. So we do really cool editing to our stories. And so I think it makes it a lot of fun, and not just the boring news story where you just see, clip after clip after clip. So you can have a lot of fun, and it's just a neat age group to do it for.
Yeah. So this is a fantastic resource for families. I mean, and I know you guys have talked about how this isn't just something a student watches on their own, but this is something that actually a family with all their kids can sit down and watch together and engage it together. And what a great tool for a family to sit, watch the 10-minute episode, hear, what's going on in the world, getting these different perspectives, and then being able to just let that foster so much discussion. I know that's one thing in our house that as we've watched news, that may be one of the biggest things that I think kicks off conversation as our kids have questions, as we get to kind of chew things up with them, as we try to help them see everything through the truth of Scripture, right? I mean, if the Bible is a factually accurate account of reality, then it's going to help guide us through all of these, these human stories. And so this is a great tool for students, but also just for families, I think, to engage in this together and to think carefully about the world that we live in.
Yeah, and that's been a really cool part about as we've done this, that we hear from families, is they say, we watch it, we'll watch it right before lunch or watch it right before dinner. And then they're talking all during dinner and they're discussing stuff. And one of the key things that we've always tried to do is really kind of build critical thinking. And like, it always feels for us like we started it and then we hand a baton to the parent, to the teacher, and they keep talking about it, right? And it just helps to develop, the thinking through the whole story and what's happening behind the scenes. And that is, we get a lot of people writing into us, and that's been like some of the coolest things. And sometimes it just helps like build relationships between families. Like there'll be some parents who are like, my kids are getting into high school and it's just a little awkward. We don't know what to talk about anymore. And they'll go, okay, so we play it right before dinner and we can talk about the second story, or we can talk about the, the feature. And it's just, I don't know. It's really neat hearing those stories.
Most people actually say they watch it during breakfast, like homeschool families will say breakfast, which is why we're trying to launch our own cereal brand with Brian's face on it called Basham. So if anyone listening designs cereal boxes or works with Kellogg's, help us out here.
Well, I was going to say...
the fat O handled. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say I think my sister Anna, I think, is the first one who told me about World Watch a couple years ago. And she watches it with her 4 kids at breakfast time. And she was telling me, oh, it's just 10 minutes. And I loved that so much because her kids are younger than mine, but as we were raising our kids, I was constantly trying to pull in news stories, or I would be telling the kids stuff that's going on, or we had subscriptions to different like Voice of the Martyrs, things like that, to help my kids see that God was doing things around the world. And basically you guys packaged it all for families so easy. So I love that. And yeah, most of the people I know watch it at breakfast time. So I totally think you guys should do a cereal. That would be perfect. World Watch cereal while they watch, eat it while they watch. But okay, Caleb, you talked about growing up in a Christian home, and Brian, you did too. But oftentimes as parents listening, Brett and I too, there can be at times this instinct to say, I would rather kind of put my kids in a bubble and not really talk about what's going on in the world, especially some of the tough things that you guys talk about on World Watch. I mean, you'll cover a topic, like you said, Brian, of abortion or of the gender stuff going on or of wars that are going on around the world. And sometimes we just want to say, well, I don't really want to bring up the hard stuff that's going on around the world. But the four of us know it's actually vital that we do that we start telling our kids about what's going on in the world and helping them, like you said, Brian, think critically about it. So Caleb, if I was a mom saying, I don't know if my kids really need to know what's going on around the world, what would you say to them to kind of persuade them, no, this is important?
Well, look, I get it. I totally understand it. We have a 17-month-old daughter, and you just want to protect them from everything. And I totally understand. I get it. What I will say is they will see it one day. Like they can't live in your house forever. And so would you rather they find that out in the world or watching MSNBC or watch CNN? Or would you rather be sitting right next to them as they learn these things from an organization that is concerned for their soul, that they would know Christ, and then you can be there to talk with them about it, that you have the tools to talk about it with them. And so I get it. Like, there's no one size fits all. Some families, it's not good for them to have news in the household. Okay, that's fine. But wholesale, I'm an advocate for it because it also opens up your mind to all the other things going on around you, that you aren't really the center of the universe, that there are other humans on this planet going through other things. And so, yes, we want to generate discussion with World Watch, but we also hope to generate prayer, that these kids are learning how to pray for the nations and pray for the leaders of the nation and things like that. And so I think proactively it teaches them to pray for others. But even just, instinctively, you're giving them good critical thinking skills while you're sitting right next to them and talking through these things.
Yeah, I love
It's
that.
funny.
I love that point. And Brian, I want to hear from you too, but I love just them seeing the world doesn't revolve actually around them. And we all grow up that way. Of course, we're little. We don't realize there's this big world out there. And then, even as we grow older, we have no problem being very self-centered. And so to point our eyes to other people who have struggles that are much different from ours can give our kids a perspective that is so necessary. So I love that point in particular. But okay, Brian, yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and so I was thinking too is when we first started, we were really leery about jumping into some of these stories because you don't quite fully understand your audience, and you don't want to. You want to give them something that's useful, but you don't want to shut them down. And so what we decided to do was, hey, look, if we're going to address one of these stories, we're going to put a warning on it. And so we kind of put it in the hands of the parent or the teacher, and they could check it out ahead of time. We let them know it's coming. And so, because I really felt it was important, especially, man, that 20 to 23 started to get so wacky. And, you think about, you hear all these stories, how many people they grew up in a Christian home. The kids seem solid. You send them off to college, and sometimes it's the next semester. This is the next year, and they've adopted all this weird behavior and kind of these social contagions that happen, and part of that was because we bubbled them growing up, right? And so they first got these exposures, like, "Oh, that's fascinating," or "I must be this. I've never even heard about it." And I think if you don't if you're not sharing those things and talking through those things with your students so that they can critically think when they're hit with that stuff, then you're not really doing them any favors. I know it feels like it at the time, and probably had a great childhood. I'll give them that, but it's going to make it really hard to contend with those things when they get older. And
Yeah,
they feel,
I think
you
that
really deal with that peer pressure. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that really fits with what we constantly encourage parents to do is not isolate your kids, but inoculate your kids. And the way you do that is you're preemptive. You're helping them to engage with the world. You're not merely protecting them. Of course, when they're really young, protection's appropriate. But as they are in later elementary, middle school, high school, especially if they have a mobile device, which most of them do. I mean, they're being exposed, whether you know it or not. And just, I mean, you can't drive around or be in a store without getting exposure. And so the best approach is preparation, is being preemptive. I want my kids to hear about the news and about biblical truth from me first. I want them to hear about the challenges of culture from me first. So World Watch just gives parents a real tool to give them exposure, but in a healthy way that ends up allowing parents to take the lead and model for them, okay, what does engagement look like? Because even as adults, kids who are isolated all growing up often become adults who pull back from culture or view culture merely as, it's all the bad stuff out there, rather than seeing it from, Genesis chapter 1, that God has actually given us as image bearers the task of creating culture. And so we can actually engage the culture, redeem culture, rebuild culture, restore culture, all of these good things. But part of that means we've got to be able to kind of be conversant with culture. Now, you mentioned, Brian, that this is also something that not just for families and individual students, but you guys have a program, a kind of a program for educators as well, because we have Christian educators that listen to the podcast and that we work with at MAVEN. And so this could be a really good tool for educators. Give us a little overview of how you guys tailor some of this stuff for maybe the Christian classroom.
Well, I would say that the show is pretty similar, if I'm being honest with you, for both groups, and really when you have it designed for the schools, it's just so that they're able to take it home. So it allows the consumption across the entire school. If all the teachers, whoever wants to show it, can show it, and then they can also get they're not really subscriptions, but each person within that school could take it home and watch it with their family. So that's kind of cool. So you're able to talk about it at school, and the kid can go, "Hey, Mom, Dad, look what we looked at school today. Watch today at school," and they could show it to their parents and have a discussion as well on that front. And so we did for a time, and we do it a little bit still, is kind of build out some worksheets that kind of help either teachers or parents, whatever, if they want, kind of discussion topics. And so that was something that we were doing as part of that. But really it's just the opportunity for that to be shared on a wider scale, and so the kids can share it with their parents. And so kind of a little tag team there.
Yeah. Okay. Now give us a little, maybe kind of behind the curtains look. As reporters, as journalists, there's so much going on in the world every single day. What is the process for trying to figure out what you incorporate, what you're going to cover?
I mean, one of the main litmus tests is, can we show it? And so it's a video program. We're not print, we're not podcast, so we got to be able to cover it, preferably with video, but sometimes with photos. And so we have a handful of main news sites that will pull video from that has journalists employed all over the world to get that video. And it's really just the raw video product. They'll give us a story, but it's kind of up to us as reporters to triangulate there and get multiple resources to prove what's true in that story, but it really comes down to what can we get good video of. So yeah, there will be some cool discoveries of a turtle down in New Zealand that we heard about, but there's no video or photo of it. Well, sorry, it's not for World Watch. It's a cool story, but it's not for World Watch. So we try to let the video drive it, and then there's a certain balance that we want to have also between things that are happening on Capitol Hill to things happening in international conflicts to scientific discoveries to fun little human interest things. And our executive producer, Rich Bishop, does a really good job and has a really good sense for how we can kind of keep that rhythm and that pace throughout the show. So it's not just super politics heavy or just goofy heavy, or just all fun stories. It's a little bit of all of that. And it's been refined, I think, through the years. But that's kind of, from my perspective, when I'm picking even feature stories that I'm writing or helping write the A block with the news stories, we got to have a good video for it. That's going to be a big piece. But yeah, Brian has a lot more on kind of the process of selection.
Yeah, and we would use some of that. I hear my dog's trying to break in the door over here.
That's
he
okay.
hates being alone.
This is a family show, so if dogs come in, it's all right.
All right, fair enough. That may happen. He's pretty strong. But anyway, so we kind of use that video as kind of a last element, right? Is we find stories that we're interested in. Now, can we find a good video to help support it, or can we shoot it, or create it, or create graphics? And so that's kind of like the last thing to fine tune which stories we're going to tell. So we find a bunch that we're interested in, and we try to have like a couple, like 2 or 3 major news stories that are coming in from around the world. And so we always want to have a good balance. And really in 10 minutes, you're probably going to be able to have somewhere between 5 and 8 stories. And so you're pretty limited on what you can choose. And so the nice thing for us is it's not like regular news where once they cover the war in Ukraine, they're going to cover it 12 times a day for 5 years. We can cover it today, and then we don't have to come back to it till next week if we don't want to, or 2 weeks down the road. So we don't follow the same structure as regular news does. We try to hit a whole bunch of different topics, and then come back to it later, like I said before, just to build strength on it, build extra story, and build depth of understanding.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, in that, I think that, I bring up the question because part of, the whole choosing process, what you choose to report on, it seems to be a really important piece in journalism, because if you've got particular, political views or views about, the world or things like that, and you've got, true things, you got facts out there that don't make quote unquote your side look good, then not reporting on that, this seems to be, kind of a derelict of duty for a journalist who's interested in the truth. So just even deciding what to report on seems to be a pretty important task for a journalist in giving an accurate picture. And, even in the church, this is where, we hate to hear stories of, things that happen in the church, whether it's abuse or some kind of scandal, but that's part of our duty as people who are to be faithful to the Lord Jesus Christ. That means, hey, revealing all this ugliness. In fact, thinking about the Bible as the standard, that's what the Bible does. The Bible reports on these men and women who followed God very imperfectly, and there were major scandals in the scriptures. But choosing what to tell shapes the news.
Absolutely. And I agree with you on that point about you really should be, I think it's important to show the good in the world. And a lot of times we don't see that in news, but I also think it's important to reflect everything that's happening. Well, most everything, because you don't, if you think all the world is rosy all the time, you're not going to understand your need for God, right? And part of that is journalists is exposing that is to understand that there's sin in the world and the weight of it, and how it affects you and everyone around you, or the whole world. And if you don't tell those stories, then you're missing the need for God, for a Savior,
Yeah. Well, one thing that I love that you guys do is you have a little catechism at the end of your show, and I don't know if you guys think of it as a catechism, but it definitely is, because the kids who watch World Watch say this phrase to me. If I bring up World Watch, they'll say, "Oh, whatever the news, the purpose of the Lord stands." And that's the catechism you end with, reminding the listeners of truth. And just thinking about all that Brett was saying about the bad, there is a lot of bad news out there, but you guys end on a hopeful note. So maybe just a little bit about that, like how did that come about, deciding to do that, and the good of ending on this reminder of truth.
Yeah, we at the beginning we did want to leave it with a hopeful, leave the day's news, because the news can be pretty horrible a lot of days, right? And or it's mixed bag, and we just knew we didn't want to end the show like that. And so we tossed around. I don't know if you guys have listened to The World and Everything in It. And that's a podcast, World's podcast. And Nick Eicher hosts that. And he and I, he was helping me as we started this in the very beginning. And he and I came up with back and forth with ones trying to leave, a nice saying at the end. And we just couldn't come up with anything. And then finally the fetching Mrs. Basham said, "Well, what about Proverbs?" And I'm like, "Well, what about Proverbs?" And so she's the one who pointed out the verse for us, and it just so Megan came up with that, actually, my wife, and it just fit perfectly with what we're doing. And I love everywhere we go. We went. We've been doing for the last 3 years. We do a World Watch Day at Boyce College, and there's probably 900 people, maybe a little more, that show up, and you have the whole audience do it with you on camera, and it's like, it's chilling. It's so fantastic that it's so implanted in their heads. And really, if they watch whole news for the day, we hope they remember at least some of the stories. But if they don't remember anything else and they have that solid every day, then we feel really good about that.
Well, maybe the last question here. I'm curious. You guys have been you've been covering the news. You're constantly looking at what's going on, not only in our country but in the world. Okay, so given your experience covering the news this past year, what is, just curious, and I want to hear from both of you, Brian and Caleb, what is your perspective? Maybe, kind of, you're down in the weeds, you're kind of in the forest, but you also, I think, probably have a little bit of a 30,000-foot view as well. What is your view maybe of our country, or where culture's headed? Are you hopeful? Are you discouraged? Are you concerned? What is, when you look back on this last year, what's your perspective?
Man, that's a loaded question, because there's so many different ways to answer that. I think generally, as Christian journalists, we should be naturally pretty optimistic, because nothing's new under the sun. So even if it's been a bad year of news, it's like, let's go back 10 years. There's probably a bad year of news. Go back 20 years. There's a bad year of news. So it's just everything kind of works in a cycle in that way. That's why I call it a news cycle. I guess what I'll focus more on is our audience tends to encourage me more, so I can focus on the ether, just the general 8 billion people out there, and or the 330 million in America that are doing this or trending this way, but I don't really know, because I'm not face to face with them, what they're really saying. I'm just seeing trends, I'm seeing numbers, and seeing them on social media. Generally, that makes me pretty pessimistic, pretty discouraged, seeing how people are acting on there. But then I get face to face with these kids, especially these kids growing up in Christian families, homeschool, even if they're not homeschooled. And I'm really encouraged. I'm talking to them. I'm going, this kid's 10 years old. He's way smarter than I am, but he's more interesting to talk to than I am also. Like this balance here, these really well-rounded kids. I think there is a good next generation coming. I think often as we get older, we tend to be pretty critical of the next few generations. And I'm looking at it and talking to some of these kids and going, oh, these are rock stars here. So I'm encouraged talking to our viewers and talking to those kids and yeah, and then just generally, yeah, in the spirit of the tag out of whatever the news and purpose of the Lord will stand. Yeah, I'm encouraged, and it's applicable, especially this year, because there's been a lot of hard news this year, and just gruesome things that we've had to witness, and it's not only like a nice thing to think about, oh, whatever the news, the purpose of the Lord will stand, but that stuff will hit and you'll have a bad day or have a bad event. And if that's the first thing that comes to mind, it's kind of like hiding God's word in your heart. That just almost is rote memory. It's a muscle memory, and you're going to come back to that. And that's a sweet thing. So I am encouraged that the purpose of the Lord does stand, and things are going to keep ebbing and flowing, and nothing's new under the sun, but that stays the same.
Mm.
Nice. Yeah, Brian, how about you?
It's funny. I've all my life I've been very optimistic. Megan was always joking about it, and I just generally view the world very positively. I love being around people, and I'm energized by that. But I won't lie. Once COVID hit, and that period, that stretch really had me concerned, right? And I've been pretty concerned, and especially being in the news, when you see all these news stories and you see the way it's going, you see the way it's covered, and it was not going well, I don't think. And I'll be honest, though, I think this last year there has been that God is moving hearts, and I see a complete shift. It's almost like you see somebody who's been battling with depression their whole life, and they come to the Lord, and they still struggle with it, but they have a hope and a joy that comes from that relationship that kind of sets them off in a different trajectory. And I feel that. I feel like that's happening. I see that younger generation kind of turning back towards God, having desire. I work out with this guy, and he's 22 years old, and so he's training me, and he was not a Christian. He and I have a lot of conversations, and he's just very curious, and he's asked a ton of questions, and in the last couple of months, he's come to church with me. He's asked, he's become a Christian. He's now talked to his girlfriend about it, and she's coming, and now she's become a Christian. And there's just a curiosity there that God has stirred in these guys. And so I feel super optimistic about it. And I think a lot of that is stemming out of the younger generation. But I see people also having a more of a confidence to share. I think it's so intimidating sharing your faith with people and sharing the truth with people. And I see people getting bolder in their desire to do that. And I think it's being reflected on both ends, the sharers and the receivers. And so I feel totally optimistic about what's ahead.
Mm.
Well, World Watch is a great resource for not only young people, but the parents, the grandparents, the educators, the youth workers out there who are working with young people. Okay, Brian, Caleb, if people want to find you guys and find out more about World Watch and what you guys are doing, where do they go?
Well, it's a good time to right now. We're running a deal of 90 days free. If you're a new subscriber, you can get 3 months. So even if you don't even sign up for World Watch, you can know what happens 3 months out of the year at worldwatch.news. It's pretty easy to remember, just worldwatch.news. You go to that website and you get 3 months free of news. And if you don't want to commit all the way, we do little samples of stories on social media, like on our YouTube channel and Instagram and Facebook, that they can just see a little bit without committing all the way. But worldwatch.news is the place to go to sign up for the show.
All right. Well,
Okay.
it's
Give
a
it a
great
try.
resource.
Yeah.
Yeah. Worldwatch.news, free 90-day subscription. And then it's only, it's $6.99 a month. That is.
Yeah. I was gonna say it's less than $10 a month. And I was gonna just say, listeners, World Watch didn't pay us to come on the podcast. We asked them because we know, we see what they're doing, and we think it's so important. And so they were generous to us to give us their time, and we think this is such a valuable thing. And like I said, when my kids were little, my adult kids were little, I was pulling stuff together myself and trying just to keep my kids informed and show them that God's moving all around the world. And like I said, you guys make it so easy. And what an amazing resource, which is why when I found out about it, I just thought it was so great.
Yeah,
So,
and what we've always encouraged parents to do is, again, it's not isolation. We are actually, our goal in raising kids is to send them back out into the world.
mhm,
And in order to effectively do this, they are going to need to know about the world that they're going into.
mhm.
And so World Watch is a fantastic resource for this. Go to worldwatch.news to get all the information. Brian, Caleb, thanks for joining us on the Maven Parent Podcast.
Yeah, thanks, you guys.
Thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
It's been a good time. Thank you.
Maven exists to help the next generation know truth, pursue goodness, and create beauty for the cause of Christ. Through your generous financial partnership with Maven, you are having an impact on the lives of students and families across the country. To become a monthly partner, visit maventruth.com and click on the donate button.